Warning, first off, this video will have lots of bright, colorful, strobing lights, because that's just the nature of the game, so if that's a problem, then you should probably not watch it, or just listen to it or something like that, you never know. This is Beat Hazard 2, actually, in early access currently. Something that I didn't actually expect to be happening, because I didn't realize that this was actually going to be a thing at any point, but Beat Hazard was a really cool game. It was pretty original for its time. I say that as if it was a really long time ago, it wasn't, but it was some time ago. And it was in the realm of rhythm games and things of that nature, only it was a lot different from those because it was really a shooter, a top-down 2D asteroids-like shooter kind of deal, but powered by music, fueled by your music or its own soundtrack or whatever you wanted to sort of plug into its list. Which was a pretty cool idea at the time. It was very responsive. The beat actually altered the power of your weapon and things like that. It was really cool to watch, but it was very bright and intensely colorful and pulsing to the point where some people actually couldn't play it for very long because it legitimately hurt their eyes. The game seems to know that because it actually makes jokes about that in the loading screen sometimes, but yeah, it's still very bright. So Beat Hazard 2 is picking up where the last one left off, with a bit of a really big change, actually. Because in the first game, in order to get your music going, you basically had to have it physically downloaded onto your computer. And at the time, that was pretty normal. Music streaming services hadn't really gotten off the ground as much yet. They existed, but they weren't huge like they are now. And that was pretty standard, but now this game actually comes with, and I think this is probably one of the biggest features, or one of the biggest reasons that it's actually in early access in the first place, because it has a pretty good amount of content already, although there's going to be more added. It has what's called the open mic system, which basically makes it to where it can integrate itself with just about any kind of music streaming service, from Spotify to Apple Music or Amazon Music, or even just YouTube in the background if you want. Basically anything that you can play and make sound in the background, the game can actually pick up on and use as the fuel for a very colorful good time, which is really neat because this makes it to where it's not limited at all. You can use any music that you listen to, even in a free way, and it can still recognize it and play with it just the same. So I use a lot of Spotify here in the background. I'm not sure how to make this video and not get like copyright striked into oblivion, so I'm just gonna have the mostly instrumentally stuff and the audio down quite a bit in the background, hoping that that will help me not get destroyed by the legal system, or well, the automated system of YouTube. We'll see how that goes. But in this particular iteration of the game, it has a couple of interesting differences aside from that really big feature, like the idea that the overall engine in terms of the particle effects and the brightness and the flashiness has been changed. It's still there, and it's still very bright and very flashy, but it looks a little better now. I find that even though it's actually even more colorful, and there are more things that flash quite brightly than there were before, it's actually cleaner and easier to see, which is a big change because part of the problem of the first game, even though I loved it, was that in some really intense songs on really high difficulty settings, it actually got so difficult to see what the hell was going on that you basically just had to hope to live for a few seconds at times. And that's not so much the case anymore. It has a better way to respond to the tempo, the beat, the rhythm, whatever it is of the song that you're playing. And this makes your actual weapon stream, of course, start and stop dependent on the beat. And it makes the colors intensify and even sort of flash out, and not exactly lens flare, but something similar to that, depending on how intense the action actually is, the song actually is. And it actually goes back to a fairly easily readable, but very colorful, kind of flashy display that is really nice to look at. And then moments of intensity kind of burst this big light strobe in your face every now and then, instead of it being just a constant flash fest all the time, which is a welcome change because, like I said, the first game was very pretty, almost too pretty, and this game actually improved a lot of what made that pretty in terms of the quality of the particle effects and things like that, but it also changed how they responded to your music, which is a plus, in my opinion. You'll even see that in some places, background fog and other particles that aren't necessarily coming from your ship also pulse and color with the song now, which is a really cool little difference. And when you have moments like this, for instance, where you have a short break in a song and then it builds back up and then comes back in really hard, it makes for some really, really cool effects. So, what else has changed? Well, probably one of the other biggest things that's changed is the way that the bosses work. The first game had a couple of bosses that it sent at you, and then the expansion for it had a few more. In this case, the bosses are considered procedural, and I think that in that case, that's not entirely done yet for the early access release, as it is at the time of recording. But it also produces a pretty cool array of bosses that have a sort of handmade frame, and then the weapons and placement on them is a little bit different, and you have to sort of take them to pieces by destroying their weapons and trying not to get destroyed yourself. And it also makes the overall combat with bosses a bit less predictable, I suppose. Less predictable than the first game, which is welcome as well. And like I said, I think there's going to be more to that system later on in the lifetime of the early access and eventually the launch of the game. But as it stands right now, you can see what they're going for and how it kind of makes sense. I also would say that this open mic system, like I mentioned earlier, is probably one of the prime reasons that it's actually in early access. And I mean that because this is a fairly ambitious idea to get working correctly. And it's not exactly easy, I would assume. I mean, I don't have the coding experience to tell you, but it doesn't seem like it would be an easy thing to have working flawlessly at all times because of the huge array of songs and conditions that it can be exposed to. You can even just have it detect your microphone and just yell at the game in order to make it make its effects as if it were music. It will just take the sound of your voice and actually do that, which is amazing. And I want to see people, like, I don't know, improv singing like Bohemian Rhapsody or something on YouTube as like a video to see if they can get through just on their own voice. It's a really cool feature, and of course with a feature that expansive and that difficult, that complex, there are going to be some issues. Right now, I think the main two issues I've had with the open mic system are with song duration, basically. Sometimes it well, first I should say it almost is like a Shazam-style system where it detects the song for a few seconds of playing, and then it will tell you at the top the name of the song and what it's off of and things like that. And it usually gets this right, but occasionally it can't recognize it, and it seems very sporadic whether or not it can recognize it, because it will recognize every, like, say, 11 out of 12 songs off of one album, and for some reason one of them it just won't detect, even though it knew the artist and the album and all of the others. I'm not entirely sure why this happens, but it doesn't happen super often as long as you start the song from the beginning and give it the chance to listen. It usually gets it, although occasionally I've had it say that it was an instrumental version of a song that was not, or something like that. And this isn't the biggest deal, but I think the main relevance of it is for scoring, if you really want to get, you know, if you're hardcore about trying to score against other people online. If it can't detect the song, then it has no scoreboard, of course, so you have to make sure that it does it correctly. But the main reasons I've had to say that it definitely needs a little bit of work, even though it's a really cool system, is one, occasionally if a song transitions very, very smoothly into the next song on the album, it will actually keep going and not end at the end of that song. And so you basically are technically playing one song, but you're actually playing multiple, and it scores you for the entire duration, like 9 minutes, because you went through a couple of songs and it just didn't stop you. That doesn't happen that often, because, like I said, when it recognizes the song, it puts up at the top the name of it and a little progress bar. So it obviously knows how long the songs are. And usually when it gets to the end of the progress bar, I assume that makes it stop. It tells the game to end because that's the end of the song. But occasionally I've had it not end there. The other problem is the exact opposite. I've had it end songs too early, even when it recognizes them. Now, this happens because I think the silence detection, it has a detection for silence specifically, and I think it's a little bit overzealous at times, and it will, if a song drops out just for less than a second sometimes, it will end right there, no matter how much of the song is actually left. So just a song goes quiet, you know, in like an interlude or something like that, or there's like a moment of silence before some sort of big drop, or who knows what, anything like that that causes the volume to basically dip to completely zero for a very short time, can have the song end early. Which is annoying, because obviously you want to play the whole thing, and it has detected it and sees that, you know, there's like, I don't know, 2 minutes of the song left, but it will still stop early if this happens, and I don't exactly know why. It seems like it shouldn't be able to use that sort of silence detection as a way to end the song, maybe to pause the game or something like that, but to completely end is sort of obnoxious at times. Other than that, and those problems have only existed on very few songs that I've tried, it works really well. It's really, really cool to just be able to have your entire library of however many songs you want, or even YouTube videos or whatever, to use as the fuel for the game. That's super cool, and it works really well when it actually is detecting something, which is most of the time, and responding to it. It makes a really cool scene, the way that things come in and come out, the way that the stream of your weapon actually alters depending on things like bassier beats, you know, like a blast beat or something like that, tends to make it kind of jumpy and funny looking. It's really cool, basically, how detailed the actual detection for beats and different types of rhythms and different elements of a song, like a very high treble song versus a very low bass song or something like that. It alters all of this, which is very cool. I want to see someone do like an endurance challenge of listening to like a 3-hour podcast on YouTube and then record themselves trying to play through the whole thing without losing, because that would be really fun. The game also has a system of allowing you to increase the visual intensity in order to make the game more difficult, because you won't be able to see what's happening. You will, but it'll be very bright. And this will actually up your score. So if you want to, you can increase all of these colors and effects that you're seeing to make the game even harder, but give yourself a better score on the upside, and on the downside, your retinas will basically be spot welded to your skull afterwards, but it's still really cool. And I think that's mostly my current opinion of the game. It's really cool. Music is a very wonderful thing. There are people that say that magic doesn't exist in real life, and I would tell them that that is wrong, because that's what music is. And music it's a very wonderful thing, and actually having your own custom music in games is something that a lot of us seek out, whether it's a custom radio station in Grand Theft Auto, or some sort of Spotify integration for a playlist during your gaming, whatever it is. A lot of us really like to have our music. So of course, games that are powered by our music, that's even better. And when they do it really well, it's extremely enjoyable to actually go through. And I think that's basically what we have here with the first Beat Hazard and then Beat Hazard 2, improving on that in steps to enhance the experience and make it viable for a more modern kind of music experience due to, how big music streaming is now. They plan on adding, for instance, other weapons. And on that note, I would like to give a suggestion for the early access sort of testing, that the weapons aren't just alternate weapons, but they are other weapons that respond differently to different parts of a song. So you could have a weapon that is specifically really tuned to listen to drums, listen to really bassy spots like that, and have sort of like a huge wave that comes out, or maybe even a radial burst when a really big bassy hit happens. You can have one that's almost a bit more like a jazzy weapon, something that would respond to the higher notes, the really light taps of cymbals, and add different elements to its actual firing pattern because of that. I think that would be a really cool way to do the weapons in this game, because it is music-based after all, so why not make the weapons music-based? And everyone can use these different ones on the genres and songs that they like and see what kind of difference it makes and how they respond. I think that would be an excellent idea. Overall, it has a pretty good amount of content right now, and I feel that it's definitely worth picking up if you like the first Beat Hazard, or if you just like the idea, maybe you've never heard of it or you don't remember it. If you just like the idea of having a shooter powered by your music, because that's what it is, and it's really enjoyable for that. Sometimes you just want to sit and listen to music, and this allows you to do that in a bit of a different way, and potentially kill your eyesight. It's a really good game, I think, right now. It needs a bit of work on a couple of its systems, and it needs some more added to it, which they know that, and that's the whole reason it's in early access. So I'm willing to definitely support what's going on here, because also in terms of the worry of an early access not getting finished correctly, they have made the original game, first off, so they know what they're doing. And secondly, this is the kind of game that is definitely going to be a very good idea to have a lot of community feedback and different people's ideas coming forward to create something that is even better than it could have been otherwise. And I think that's probably a really good use of the early access system and actually, using it for good. So that's Beat Hazard 2. It is available right now for $18.99, I believe? Yeah, I think $18.99 on Steam Early Access if you want to get into it. It still has quite a bit of content in terms of the perks, and every time you level up you can choose perks that will do various things for you, and you can purchase higher levels of them and things like that. It's got content already. It's not a bare bones game, it's just that it is somewhat similar to the first game with improvements. and I think the idea of it being in early access is to make it way better than it could have been otherwise, and a significant improvement over the first game instead. So that's what I'd like to see happen, and I hope that actually ends up being the case. Hope I don't get a copyright strike for this. Thank you guys very much for watching. Look in the description below for the link to the early access page, and I'll see you next time.